This episode of The Charity Show is brought to you by The Good Studio, creating great content for good causes. Welcome to The Charity Show, the podcast that gets under the skin of what it's really like working in UK charities. Each week, we speak to the people doing the graft, the fundraisers, comms leads, campaigners and CEOs, anyone with a story or insight worth sharing. It's a practical, honest look at the sector, what's going well, what's proving tricky, and what we can all learn from each other as we try to make things work with the resources we've got. If you're enjoying the show, hit follow, give us a quick 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Right then, here's what's coming up in episode 38. I've had my first mince pie, so it's Christmas now. I
can't do mince pies. Honestly, I like the idea of them. I've tried them, and I've tried so many, just can't get into them. I think they're pretty rank, actually.
Come on, everyone loves a mince pie.
Nah.
You were telling me you don't like Christmas pudding next.
I don't mind that, which is weird, isn't it? Because that's basically
the same sort of thing.
A mince pie. I know.
Oh,
no logic.
Shocking.
I think there is a bit of a perception that shops are closing because, it's kind of a bit of a standard media thing, isn't it? But I think what's behind that is there's actually been quite a significant emphasis right the way across the sector in terms of people increasing the size of their shops. So if you've got a shop which is 500 square feet and next door or in the next door town you open a shop which is 5,000 square feet, there's a pretty good chance you don't need the 500 square foot shop. We are very insistent that the rise of online platforms is actually beneficial to us. If you've got a kind of thing going on in society which is saying actually it's normal to buy secondhand and it's good to buy secondhand, and it's then that is going to benefit our members. I think the online platforms have done a great job of normalizing secondhand shopping even more and making it even more acceptable, and that benefits our members.
This is a really worrying article, actually, a really worrying piece of research that the Chartered Institute of Fundraising has carried out, and it's calling for charities to implement a donor code of conduct after many fundraisers reported experiencing inappropriate behaviours in a recent survey.
Welcome back to The Charity Show. I'm Piers Townley.
And I'm Tim Bainan. It's Piers has got chilly this week. It's very British, as we always say when we start talking about the weather. But the heating's on, wrapped up warm. You been chilly this week?
Yeah, very chilly this week. And then back in the office, it's aircon wars with people variously complaining that it's too hot or too cold. So that's the season at the moment. It's also the season of, we're hurtling actually towards Christmas. We've got charity Christmas cards that we're trying to sort out. Thinking out of bespoke gifts to give out to the high-profile supporters of the brain tumour charity, all getting a little bit festive, and I'm actually quite looking forward to it this time of the year. It's the season's marked, isn't it, by the charity ads on the telly and everything. So, yeah, looking forward to it. And the snow the other day was fantastic. I know that's probably about all we're going to get, but that was good. How about you?
I've had my first mince pie, so it's Christmas now. I
can't do mince pies. Honestly, I like the idea of them. I've tried them, and I've tried so many, just can't get into them. I think they're pretty rank, actually.
Oh, come on. Everyone loves a mince pie.
Nah.
You were telling me you don't like Christmas pudding next.
I don't mind that, which is weird, isn't it? Because that's basically
the same sort of thing.
From a mince pie. I know.
Oh, you're
no logic.
Shocking. Also, it was the other week was Children in Need. I thought I'd just give a shout out to Sarah Cox and all that she did. That was such an incredible fundraiser. She raised such a huge amount of money and put in such a huge amount of effort for that. It's a brilliant fundraiser. Interesting, actually, because it sparked a lot of conversation on LinkedIn, and I was sort of just keeping an eye on people saying, how incredible it was that it kind of really captured people's imaginations and the spirit of things. And it got me thinking a bit about, how charities can do that and try and do that a bit more because what she did was amazing, no doubt about it. But people run marathons, ultra marathons, climb mountains, row across the Atlantic and do all these incredible things every day. But because they're not celebrities, they don't get that high profile that Sarah Cox has, and therefore, raising such huge sums of money. But I just wondered what lessons. Interesting. I'd be really keen to see what listeners think in terms of what lessons charities can learn from that Sarah Cox fundraiser, because it was amazing.
I think it's just, it's But all of the fundraising is so precious, isn't it, to the charities? So whether it's Sarah Cox and your 7-figure sums, or it's your bake sale in your local community centre that raises just a few £100, they're of equal value. And I think that's something that you've got to kind of put on the level, haven't you? Because otherwise it just the amounts just dwarf the thousands and thousands of local fundraisers that are out there as well, which are more and just as important to charities.
It is a comms dilemma though, and it's one that the charities that I've worked in they've always faced it. Like, you get asked as a comms team to promote the small bake sales as much as you get asked to promote the across the Atlantic rows. But how do you decide to weight that in terms of the weighting of time and resource and effort and coverage that you give on social and on the website, press, and so on and so forth? How do you decide as a comms team what you're going to give more weight to and therefore favour when it comes to fundraising? So perhaps that's something we should talk about on the show, because it's a difficult one.
A dilemma. We have it in our teams all the time, Tim, and it comes down to, and we say this till we're blue in the face, it's down to the stories, and it's down to people's individual stories, whether they're an Olympian doing an amazing mountain trek to a local community fundraiser. It's the personal stories and the connections and the reasons why they are supporting that charity that resonate and get the pickup and are so important to each cause. Basically, it's the stories, it's the storytelling.
But there's also some difficult conversations to be had there when you get somebody who in their opinion is doing something incredible, and they are doing something incredible, but you're just not able to give it the national exposure that they want. It's because it's maybe a very local event that they're doing. You're a national charity, it doesn't quite probably sit quite right on your national socials. So it's some difficult conversations for charity comms teams there to have, I think. But we'll dive into that at some stage.
Yeah. And we've both been in this game for such a long time as well, working with the media. You just can never guarantee what gets pick up. Sometimes we're sitting on a story that you didn't think would get that much attention, and all of a sudden it's region wide across the syndicated news news out there. So sometimes you just don't know. The right time and the right place is kind of often the way. Yeah,
exactly. Talking of things that have got unexpected coverage or unexpected exposure, I wrote a post on LinkedIn this week that I've been really surprised at how it's kind of gone. I'm never one for writing things that get take off on LinkedIn, but this one little post seems to have struck a chord with people. Basically, I was saying it's time to ditch Secret Santa. So I don't know what happens at a brain tumor charity in terms of Secret Santa, but what I was saying was essentially, I actually did some digging into it. But basically, if you look at the whole population of 39.5 million people who work, 44% of those take part in Secret Santa, apparently, according to a study quoted in the piece that I wrote, which equates to about £227 million a year spent on Secret Santa. And you think about the rubbish and the tap you get given. You get ties and socks and novelty mugs and stupid stuff. Basically, I don't think anyone has ever treasured a Secret Santa gift and still thinks, 5 years ago, John in finance gave me this amazing gift. I'll still use it every day. No, it's just a bit of rubbish that you chuck away. So I've got to be thinking, of all the charities this year that will close because they're struggling financially, and even this month, I put it in the article, there's 3 or 4, seriously, large charities that are closing their doors and are given notice that they're winding up because of a downturn in finance that's made them unsustainable. So my call to action with this post was to ditch Secret Santa, tell Santa to do one, and instead get your colleagues and your businesses to donate to charity instead. So you can make that some kind of a Secret Santa. You can do that. The prison, one of my former colleagues, John Collins, posted actually that place where he works, they give to charity instead. So the person, it is a Secret Santa. So you pick the name out of the hat, then you give to the charity that you think that person would appreciate. And I think that's kind of a nice way of approaching it. Still a kind of Secret Santa element to it, but not the tat and the rubbish. So there you go. It seems to have gone off a bit on LinkedIn, but as our mission, perhaps we should champion that as a show, Piers. It's time to ditch Secret Santa. What do you think?
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, unless you're making a real effort for that £10, £15 limit or whatever you may have as a Secret Santa, you're right. There's only so many novelty mugs you can have as a person there. They then get gifted to charity shops. Maybe it goes around what comes around, but you're right. Those figures, when you break it down, if you're going to be that, macro about it, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money and a lot of effort to try and think of something creative as well.
Yeah. The average person apparently spends £14 on a office Secret Santa gift. There you go. It could do a lot of good if that £14 went somewhere else, more needy, I'd suggest.
Adds up, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Anyway, talking of charity shops, there's lots of good segues going on in this show, Piers. Today, fantastic interview we've got coming up with Robin Osterle, the outgoing Chief Executive of the Charity Retail Association. He announced he was leaving just after we recorded this interview, and he's given us some fascinating insights into the changing shape of charity retail. So it's a really interesting conversation with him coming up. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an ear out for that. But talking to charity shops, Piers, are you going to be hitting the charity shops this Christmas?
Yeah, I always like to have a little browse. I think it's probably because we're in the sector anyway, isn't it? It's like, because the Brain Tumor Charity doesn't have any retail shops out there. We have toyed with the idea of it, and actually speaking to Robin and listening to that as well. It's obviously something that's on a lot of charities' agendas, whether they're established on the high street or thinking about it. So yeah, I'll always pop in and see what causes are going on. We've spoken about it before. Hospices do seem to do very well. There's Phyllis Tuckwell Hospice round near us, and that does so much more for the community as well. So yeah, I shall go and have a look at their festive offerings this season.
Absolutely, definitely. Always good to pop into a charity shop first week in January as well, because people often donate.
You just never know what you're going to get, do you?
Yeah, definitely. This week on the Charity Show, we're talking charity shops, a part of the sector everyone thinks they understand, but which is changing faster than many people realise. We're joined by Robin Osterle OBE, the outgoing Chief Executive of the Charity Retail Association, who's been leading the organisation for almost a decade. Under his watch, charity retail has weathered huge shifts, changing high streets, the rise of resale platforms, the move to online and charity superstores, and a growing focus on sustainability and social value. In this conversation, Robin talks about where the sector really is right now, what the public often gets wrong about charity shops, the innovations shaping the future, and why they remain such a vital part of communities across the UK. The interview is in two parts, with charity news in the middle. So let's get on with part one. Robin, welcome to the Charity Show. It's lovely to see you and lovely to welcome you onto the show this morning. We've got lots to talk about in terms of the world of charity shops and charity retail. Something Piers and I often talk about on the Charity Show and often crops up in our bite-sized episodes as well. But I've got to start off, first of all, with a congratulations on your OBE. Must have been a fantastic moment for you. Did it come as a surprise? And what does it mean for you personally and for the retail world as a whole?
It did come as a surprise. Yeah, I was away actually when the letter arrived. So I arrived back, opened the letter, and literally took the sort of 3 steps backwards, which is a strange thing to do, but it was a real surprise. I mean, obviously it's a fantastic honour, and you can't deny that. I think it does sort of say that there is an increased recognition of the charity retail sector. I mean, hopefully there's some things that I did before that have counted as well. But I think the fact that this is the first time that anyone from charity retail has ever been awarded an honour, as far as I'm aware, anyway. I think that is a recognition of an increasing understanding and acceptance of the importance of the sector within government.
Fantastic. Have you decided who you're going to take with you for the ceremony?
Well, actually, perhaps I shouldn't make this public, but they only offered me 3 tickets. And a mate of mine who I was chatting to said, well, when I did it, I just asked for some more. So I did. I asked for some more because I have 4 children and a wife, and I was going to have to draw lots otherwise. So they were kind enough to offer me 5 tickets. So it's all the kids and the missus, yeah.
Excellent stuff.
Brilliant. Got the whole gang. Oh, that'll be a fantastic day. Yeah, congratulations, Robin. That's just
Thank you.
Brilliant news. And brilliant news for, as you say, it's having any chance to shine that spotlight on the third sector as a whole, but on the Charity Retail Association specifically. And must be just a wonderful thing to do as part of that. Now, you've been leading it for over a decade now. And the sector, as we know, is massively changed and is massively changing. When you first came back in 2015, what was the state of play there? And how different does it feel now? Does it feel more stressful, more uncertain, or is it it's becoming a little bit more clear about what the association's role is?
Yeah, interesting question. First of all, it isn't quite it's 2 days now when I don't know when this is going out, but as of when we're recording it will be a decade in 2 days' time. But because I joined on the 2nd of November. But anyway, let me answer your question. So, yeah, I think it is a bit of a different scene now, because that's been quite a turbulent 10 years, obviously, because slap bang in the middle of it was COVID. And COVID made a significant number of changes to the sector in all sorts of ways. I think that the most significant changes have been a more or less linear, continuous increase in the quality and standards of the shops. And most recently, we've seen a renewed focus on turning that quality and standards into profit. The days when you could open a charity shop and just use it to create, which it does, a huge amount of social value and a presence on the high street, those days are almost behind us now. Charities are insisting, and it's totally understandable that they're doing this, that their shops are making money for the parent charities. I mean, that's what they're there for in the first place. If they're not making money for their parent charities, well, to be frank, a lot of the charities are saying, well, we can't afford to keep these guys on. And there's even a sort of deeper sense that it might be contrary to their charitable objectives, because if you make a loss in a charity shop, that has to be funded from your unrestricted funds, which you have received from donations from somewhere, the public or whatever it is, and you can't be using that money to bail out unprofitable charity shops. So I think one of the most significant changes is that a renewed emphasis on making those shops as profitable as possible, on leveraging the charity's assets as much as you possibly can to make money for the good causes. So that's driven up standards, actually, and it's caused people to open the most extraordinary, beautiful shops, as I'm sure many of your listeners will have encountered, and it's also driven up prices to an extent, and that's a great thing for the charities, and but can be controversial because people want charity shops to be inexpensive, but it's caused a renewed emphasis on value, I think. So, rather than simple cheapness. So, yeah, quite a few changes over the 10 years, really, what with one thing and another. A few things haven't changed. They're still incredibly loved by the public. They're still fantastic places to go to get amazing bargains. And they're still places that form the hub of many communities. So most of our members, staff and volunteers walk to work. They are there in the community and they know huge numbers of their customers. And a lot of that sort of, really strong charity retail ethos, charity shop ethos has continued, I think, throughout all of this turbulent period.
And Robin, do you want to talk to you about perceptions? It's quite interesting what you're saying in terms of the state of play now, but there's still this perception. I mentioned at the top of the show that we talk about it quite a lot. When Piers and I scan the news for the show, quite often we see stuff about charity shops. There's usually about charity shops closing. There's usually this perception that charity shops are struggling. But when you look at the numbers, obviously there's still a huge presence on our high streets. What do you think people get most commonly get wrong about charity retail?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a bit of a perception that shops are closing because, it's kind of a bit of a standard media thing, isn't it? It's a bad news story, so you're going to publicise it, and it's certainly if a big household name like Scope or Cancer Research UK most recently are doing significant amounts of shop closures, that is going to attract people's attention. It's eye-catching. And the media loves something that's eye-catching for all the obvious reasons. So I think that perception has been, certainly over the last 6 months or so, or a year or so, has been there. But I think what's behind that, apart from the profitability thing that I was talking about earlier, is there's actually been quite a significant emphasis right the way across the sector in terms of people increasing the size of their shops. So if you've got a shop which is 500 square feet, and next door, or in the next door town, you open a shop which is 5,000 square feet, there's a pretty good chance you don't need the 500 square foot shop. In fact, you probably don't need 2 or 3 of them. So that reduces the actual number of shops, perhaps, but may, for all we know, actually be increasing the square footage, the selling space that you actually have. So that trend, I think, is little understood by the public. I mean, they see things, they see the occasional superstore opening and so on. But I'm not talking about that. I mean, that is a factor. But I'm talking about the move from that sort of slightly traditional, crowded, small unit on a high street to something that is maybe 3 times bigger, 1,500 square feet, let's say, where you've got more room to move about, you're much more comfortable, the merchandising goes a lot better, you can use your space to further enhance the cause of the parent charity, so that you can put displays on, you can tell people what's going on in the charity. Sometimes you could use it, you can put computers there to access the charity's service as a portal. So you've got much more opportunity to do cause-related things if you have larger shops, and I think that isn't so well understood by the public.
I suppose also you get economies of scale in terms of rent. So the bigger the space, perhaps is cheaper, more economical than a small space that costs a lot to rent.
It'll cost less per square foot for sure, and you'll get economies of scale in terms of employing staff, in using volunteers more widely and readily, and of course it's great for the public because they will find more choice, and quite often, they will have an extensive range of household goods and furniture and things like that, as well as clothing. So it's a good thing all round, and it's a way of ensuring, again, just to labour the point, that you're getting the best out of your assets.
That is so interesting, Robin, because that takes the traditional view, I think, in a large amount of people's minds, of a stuffy little charity shop, and actually being it as a kind of a vehicle, an opportunity for charity then to shout about its cause, as well as trying to make some money. So there's that perception of, there could be a vehicle for just increasing the charity awareness. Is that kind of dual nature of what that retail space is for, isn't it? I mean, as you say, ultimately you need to make money, but actually it's something that maybe some charities have not thought of, but actually it's a space to showcase the work that they do.
Yeah. And we've got some fantastic examples of that. I mean, if you go into the amazing shelter shop in Cold Drops Yard in King's Cross in London, you'll see they've got a frieze all the way around the top, which is purely devoted to their work, to what shelter does. The homeless people that they've looked after, the lobbying work that they do, and all of that sort of stuff. And you can go in there and you can see all that going on. We mentioned Cancer Research UK earlier. No question, of course, that they've announced a significant program of shop closures. Much less noticeable was the fact that they, as part of that program, they are opening 12 new superstores over the next 18 months. One of their existing superstores in Stevenage, which is a very substantial shop, has got consulting rooms, where people can go and sit and talk about how cancer has affected them or their relatives, and it is much more a gateway to the services. And there's a Marie Curie shop in Bristol, where you've got computers ranged there, and people can go in and use those computers to access services from Marie Curie. So there's more and more of that going on. I mean, it's important real estate in town centres, which can be used for a variety of purposes, provided they're making money from it as well.
Yeah, but that's fascinating the way you can get that glimpse into how they have changed and had to adapt to make it just more than just, that kind of traditional kind of retail in some people's minds. But with everything else going on, Robin, cost of living crisis, some of the younger generations flooding to online retail. What's the biggest problem that your members are saying that they face at the moment? What is the one thing that's concerning them in the day-to-day?
Well, that's been hurt most, certainly over the last 6 months to just 12 months, has been a significant increase in labour costs. So, and this is really two things. It's the increase in the national living wage, which, by the way, is a really good thing. No one is complaining about it, but it is it's painful. But above all, the increase in national insurance that was announced at the last budget. And it's not so much actually the national insurance headline rate that's caused the problem as the reduction in the national insurance thresholds. Because what that's done is that's brought a whole bunch of part-timers into the NI regime for the first time. And a lot of our members, employ a lot of part-time staff. So all of a sudden, their national insurance bills have gone up very significantly. And that has undoubtedly been a significant factor. On top of all that, of course, you've got all the standard inflationary costs, rents and utilities and all of that sort of stuff. So whilst over the last couple of years, income has been either steady or a little bit of growth from year on year. It hasn't been increasing as fast as costs. So that's been putting a degree of pressure on the profitability of charity shops. I mean, most of them are still absolutely fine. Let me emphasize that. Most of them are still doing really well. They're making decent amounts of money for their parent charities. But there's no doubt that some of them have found the cost pressures just tip them over the edge away from profitability. And that, as we were saying earlier, is just not really acceptable. So that is the biggest problem. And we've been lobbying the government quite hard to say, well, actually, charities are in a very special position here. I mean, obviously everyone can plead that they're in a special position, but there's no doubt that charities are, because, essentially they're doing an enormous amount of the government's work for it. And they're not getting paid very much by the government. And in fact, all the government has done recently, in the face of some incredibly difficult choices, we totally understand that. But what it's done is actually made it harder for charities at a time when people are needing to access their services more and more. So we've been asking, and we've also put another submission into the forthcoming budget to say, look, can we do something, particularly about this NI threshold business? Can we do something to mitigate the increased costs of retail staff, because it's really hurting? If I'm honest, I don't expect the government to do that, because that would be reversing something that they just put in place. But we have to make that point, because it can't go on like this. The government and the public, for that matter, can't expect charities to keep providing services with increased costs associated with them without any additional income. It's just not right. And if charities went away, the government would suddenly be landed with some enormous bills that they wouldn't otherwise have. And who's going to do your medical research? And who's going to do your animal welfare work? Who's going to look at relief of poverty? Who's going to look after services for blind and visually impaired people in the locality? Who's going to look after mental health services? Charities are doing all of these things, and they're largely doing it by raising money from the public, which means the government doesn't have to put up taxes even more.
Lots of interesting points there, Robin. But I wanted to pick up on what you mentioned there around income, and you said obviously income isn't keeping pace with those rising costs at the moment, but it isn't dropping. It is seeing a slight increase, but it isn't quite keeping pace with those rising costs. And that's interesting. So just again, picking up on some of the perceptions in the press that charity shops are struggling, and they often quote things like the rise of Vinted and Depop and these online sites where people are selling their clothes rather than giving them to charity shops. Is that a realistic threat to the charity retail sector, or is it being overplayed by the press?
Is it a realistic threat? No. Is it being overplayed by the press? Probably. Again, it's quite a nice, easy target and quite a nice piece of eye-catching stuff. Well, let me give you the full picture if I can. So, post-COVID, the sector had two fantastically good years. 22 and 23 were probably the best years that charity retail had ever had, actually. We were looking at double digits like-for-like growth in both those years. I mean, it was just extraordinary. And everyone thought, oh, wow, the day of the charity shop has come. This is going to go on forever. Well, it was never going to go on forever because you don't do that kind of exponential growth year on year on year. It's just got to happen. So the latter half of 24 and certainly 25 have been flat compared to that, but from a very high base. So, if you're looking at only then maybe 2 or 3% growth, you're looking at 2 or 3% on what is historically a pretty high base. So income trading has been fine, really. I mean, none of our members are complaining that people aren't going into their shops and buying stuff. Nobody is saying that at all. There are a couple of factors which are a bit painful, though, and the first, most significant factor is a decline in the quality of donations. So not in the quantity of donations. Quantity of donation, they've been still coming through the doors bagful by bagful in huge amounts, but the quality has. All of our members are complaining about declining quality, or almost all of them. However, and it would be easy, wouldn't it, to attribute that to online platforms. Say, well, which is probably true, that you used to have a bag in your bedroom for the charity shop stuff. Now you've got 2 bags in your bedrooms, one for the charity shop stuff and one for the stuff that you can sell on Vinted or wherever it is. But you know what? We don't really think that there is a massive impact from that, and that there's a number of reasons. First of all, although they're doing extremely well as an organisation, Vinted, it isn't compared to the turnover of 1.4 billion or so that charity shops have every year. It's relatively small fry, but not only that. We are very insistent that the rise of online platforms is actually beneficial to us. And I quite often use this slightly jaded term now, that a rising tide floats all ships. If you've got a zeitgeist, if you've got a kind of thing going on in society which is saying actually it's normal to buy secondhand, and it's good to buy secondhand, and it's then that is going to benefit our members. I think the online platforms have done a great job of normalizing secondhand shopping even more and making it even more acceptable, and that benefits our members. And the second thing is much more practical, which is the rise of the reseller. So these are people who go into charity shops, buy stuff, and then sell it on Vinted. And actually, our members make quite a lot of money out of that. I mean, arguably, you could say they could charge a bit more for doing that, but that's not easy because they've got a certain demographic and Vinted's got a different demographic. So if people go and do this reselling job, well, good luck to them. They've taken the effort, and our members are getting the benefit because they're selling through some of that stuff. So are we concerned about online platforms as a threat? Definitely not. Do we think they are doing a great job of normalizing secondhand shopping? Absolutely. But there is a threat which is identifiable through the whole quality of donations thing, and that is the continuing rise of fast fashion, and in particular, ultra fast fashion. So particularly the online platforms from China, who I'm not going to dignify with a name, but I'm sure we can all work out.
We've both got kids, so we know them well.
Exactly. So these things are really causing, we think this is really what's behind the decline in quality. So, I'm always talking about this. You buy a sparkly top for, £2.50 or something on one of these platforms. You wear it to a party. Okay. Now, as I'm sure, looking at you both, you realize just as much as I do that you can't wear the same thing to a party twice. Not enough. So the sparkly top is sparkly top is done. You walk into the party, that's it, and it ends up in a charity shop. And then what are we supposed to do with a sparkly top that costs £2.50? We'd be lucky to get 25 or 50 pence for it, and it's not worth the shelf space that it would occupy. So it ends up being sold for to the textile collectors and textile merchants. That is the problem. It is the huge quantity of material that we manufacture across the world at unbelievably cheap prices that is driving down the quality of donations.
Really interesting conversation, and charity shops always seem to make it into the news for one reason or another, as we've touched on the podcast over the many episodes. And talking of news, what have you spotted this week, Tim?
Well, this is a really worrying article, actually, a really worrying piece of research that the Chartered Institute of Fundraising has carried out, and it's calling for charities to implement a donor code of conduct after many fundraisers reported experiencing inappropriate behaviours in a recent survey. So the Chartered Institute and the fundraising think tank Regara surveyed fundraisers on their views and experiences, more than half reporting that they had experienced donor behaviour that made them feel physically or mentally unsafe. And quite often, I don't think people realise, how intimidating this can be and how shocking this is. So this report really staggered me. The membership body has therefore urged charities to sign a pledge committing to develop and implement a donor code of conduct, something which was recommended by Regara in 2023. The main type of inappropriate behaviour, and this is shocking, Piers, the main type of inappropriate behaviour reported by fundraisers in the survey was sexually inappropriate behaviour, including sexual innuendo, banter or unwanted comments, inappropriate physical contact, improper propositioning, and one report of sexual assault. What do you make of that? I think that's staggering. These are fundraisers doing their jobs.
Yeah. And do you know what? Until we mentioned it, until we came across the story, Tim, it kind of didn't really cross my mind. I'm trying to think now, examples that I've come across in my work over at the charity, but it's not something that's on my radar. But obviously, it is happening out there. Yeah, shocking statistics, really.
It is. And listen to this as well. The survey found that the most significant amount of inappropriate behaviour was committed by major donors and philanthropists and carried out towards major donor and philanthropy fundraisers. So these are high net worth individuals. So they're that's really shocking. These aren't people that when you knock on their, this isn't door knocking on high streets and stuff where this is happening. This is happening, at high net worth individual networking events and these kind of things. That's really shocking. I couldn't believe that when I saw that. I'll just quote very briefly from Katie Doherty, who came onto the show a little while ago, actually, and she's fantastic. The chief executive of the Chartered Institute of Fundraising. And she said, while this survey represents just a sample of fundraisers operating across the UK, the results from it are simply horrifying and unacceptable. Whether it's one person or 100, a report of sexual assault, sexual misconduct, or sexually inappropriate behaviour is one report too many. No one should have to go to their work every day with the fear of this type of behaviour hanging over them. So yeah, I just thought that was a really shocking piece of news, and one that's definitely worth highlighting. And I absolutely think we should get behind their campaign to launch this donor code of conduct, because I think if that has a positive impact on this, then it can only be a good thing. And what have you got for us this week, Piers?
Quite an interesting one, actually. There's been a real water cooler moment for us at the Brain Tumour charity, and I think probably the other 11 charities out there who didn't make the Celebrity Traitors final. So Alan Carr, obviously for Neuroblastoma UK, announced, actually quite quietly and not with much fanfare, or not as much fanfare as, Neuroblastoma UK would probably like, that that's the charity that he was supporting. He's been an ambassador for them, I think now, for maybe even 9 or maybe more years than that. But, for every celebrity traitor that was in there, obviously they were representing a charity, and yet none of those charities got a shout out. And I think there's been a lot of online third sector chatter about, should they do that? Should they talk about the charities they're representing? Should they at least have a shout out to those charities? Perhaps some materials that support the various charities they get in there. And it kind of puts people on one side or another, with this water cooler conversation about should these charities get named? Should they get a shout out? And interestingly, just a day ago, because a list appeared over on LinkedIn and various other places as well that outlined all the celebrities and what charities they were aligned with. Blood Cancer UK came out with a post yesterday just having a shout out to neuroblastoma and Alan Carr, but also saying that, their own ambassador, Nick Mohammed, who was supporting them, was part of this list. So, part of the awareness that was given. And obviously at the bottom of that list alphabetically, it was Tom Daly, and Tom Daly was doing it for the brain tumour charity. But, with all the guidelines that are going on and their impartiality and all of this, those charities kind of weren't really shouted at. And there's an opportunity there that I think a lot of organisations would probably have liked to capitalise on. So I can kind of see both sides of an argument about whether they should be named or shouldn't be named. But in the end of the day, everyone is trying to do it for good causes. So let's try and help the good causes. If not going to win the financial part at the end, but at least have a little bit of a shout along the way. What do you think, Tim?
I think I've talked about this before. I think definitely they should have been. I thought they missed a trick when, during the show, whenever they did that sort of the pieces to camera with the celebrities in the chair, and they always put up their little strap line, didn't they, with their name and their age and their occupation. Why didn't they put the charity they were playing for on there as well? Would have been such a simple thing to do.
Yeah, we've got skin in the game. Obviously, Tom was there, and would have done it for us, and has supported us for many years. So yeah, I'd like to have seen our logo, a little one-liner, and I kind of don't really see the arguments against doing that. I'm prepared to have my mind changed, but all these charities, the awareness and the huge success of that show. Obviously lots of charities weren't mentioned. There were only 12 of them, but, so what an opportunity, what a lovely opportunity to give a little bit back to a good cause. Relatively, not really putting any difficulty in saying them, the shout outs.
I can't see the case for not doing it. So I think I don't understand the reason for not doing it. So I think that's definitely something a trick that they missed.
Now for part 2 of our conversation with Robin Osterle from the Charity Retail Association. In this half, we dig into the social value of charity shops, the sustainability agenda, and what the next few years might hold for the sector. Let's jump back in. Is generally across the sector most of the income from fashion then, rather than, for example, books and other things? It's mainly fashion that is kind of changing or driving the adaptation, for example, of shops, having their online shops as well. But so it's fashion really that is the one key thing here.
The vast majority of income from charity shops comes from apparel, and most of that is ladies' apparel, actually. There is a significant income from furniture as well. But the other kinds of threads like household goods, bric-a-brac, books, CDs, not so much. It is primarily a clothing business and a fashion business, and that's I guess the most significant part of what our members do, particularly, as I say, female clothing. So, yeah.
And some of the shops, or a lot of shops, we've got a figure here that could be quite wrong. The 3/4 of the shop are also trying to sell online as well. So this sort of wraps up the conversation we had in the last 5 minutes. It's more like an adaptation then, rather than a threat to the retail side of things. Then this kind of bringing in the online angles to some of these shops.
Yeah, I mean, the charity retail is quite different in lots of ways from commercial retail, because of the lack of known stock, if I may put it that way. You can't really have a website which sells a load of charity retail items. You can, but it's quite difficult to do so. Now, it may be that down the road, not that far down the road, actually, AI might be able to help us with this, so that you could list stuff incredibly quickly that you've been donated, and it could go smack onto your website. And a lot of our members are doing that. They've been working really closely with eBay and a few other online platforms for some time now, but mainly to sell sort of treasure. So something comes in that is extremely valuable. It might come into a shop whose demographic is not such that you could sell it in that environment, or it might just be that you'll get a better price for it if you put it on eBay. You'll get a national audience or even an international audience for it. So a lot of our members have been doing that. So special stuff quite often goes online. in a variety of different ways. But your average sort of run-of-the-mill clothing, there's too much of it coming through, really, to easily put it onto a website unless we get some AI-based solutions, which, as I said, might well happen. So our members, which is obviously almost exactly the opposite way around from most commercial retailers now, who are pretty much relying on their online business. And for whom the bricks and mortar side of it is something that they just really need to do for a high street presence. And I think you are looking at a substantial length of time when charity shops will be continuing with their bricks and mortar presence. But I think online will become an increasingly important part of what we do, as has been the trend. The proportion is not high, but it's definitely growing.
It's interesting because obviously, as you say, that's a stark contrast to the rest of the retail world that's pushing people online all the time. What, in terms of things that are evolving and things that are changing, are you seeing as a result of that charities and charity retail is having to think differently in terms of how it promotes and markets itself to get that footfall, to encourage people through the doors? Are you seeing innovation in that space as well?
Yes, and I think it's important to recognise that one of the great things about charity retail is that it is its versatility in terms of its customer base. So we quite often talk about having 4 different types of customers. So there's the economic customer who is simply looking for a bargain. Maybe they're up against it financially themselves. It's a great place to get really good quality, high value, but low cost, particularly clothing and indeed furniture. So that's a really important part. Then you get sort of people who are kind of crafters, who are looking for something to sort of support their hobby. So they'll go into a charity shop and maybe do some upcycling, or get a garment, turn it into some other garment, or get a piece of furniture and turn it into that kind of thing. Small but an important part. Thirdly, there's people who are simply fed up with the high street and want something different, and you do see quite a few of those kinds of people. I've always said if you parachute into any UK high street, you never know where you were. They all have the same sort of stuff, and charity shops provide an antidote to that, and offer something that is completely different from what you can normally get in the high street. And fourthly, and in some ways the fastest growing probably and most important, is the sustainable shopper, the person who is looking to buy second hand because they want to make less of an impact on the planet. They're looking to buy stuff from a good cause rather than some hedge fund in London. And so because you've got those 4 different types of charity shoppers, there's a lot of resilience in the customer base, because at one point, there's obviously a bit of overlap between them as well. If one of those declines, then there's a good chance another of them will pop up to take its place. So I think this, in order to address those 4 different markets, I think this is the direct answer to your question. There has to be a lot of innovation and creativity amongst our members. They have to understand that, are they aiming for this type of audience, or are they aiming for that type of audience? And it will be different. If you're running a chain of 100 shops, well, there's not many people run chains that big, but if you're say a hospice running a chain of about 50 or 60 shops, you are not going to want all those shops to be the same. You're going to want them to be addressing different markets in different ways.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up to that? In terms of those audiences you mentioned, where do you see the biggest potential, or where's the biggest growth at the moment in terms of age? If you look, is it young people? Is that where the growth is?
Well, certainly for the sustainable shopper, as you might expect, young people form the majority of that and will continue to do so. It's not a monopoly for young people by any means. People my age, even people my age, are looking to make less of an impact on the planet as well. But if what has attracted a lot of young people, we have a directory of Instagram influencers who are specifically focusing on charity shopping, and there's more and more of them. They come in sort of month after month. New people are just so excited about what you can find in a charity shop. So I think, and that is probably the area where we like to be seeing the most growth amongst youngsters. But all the other markets are important as well.
I like the idea of when you pointed out, Robin, that a lot of commercial leaders, a commercial experience is coming into the sector to wanting to innovate and to bring their experience. It might be slightly unfair to ask, but are there any charities you could name or any examples of the way these shops or where these ideas have made something that's really unique or something that's really unusual to the retail sector?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult to say because it's quite specific, but I think probably it may be that the rise of superstores that we were talking about earlier is something, is a concrete example of this. Because some of those superstores are astonishing. I mean, Emmaus, which is a highly well-respected charity that spends a lot of time looking after the needs of homeless people. They've recently opened a 120,000 square foot shop in Preston. It was next to Debenhams, and they filled it. I mean, they mostly sell furniture, so obviously that takes a bit more space. But basically, it's an emporium. That is one of the biggest shops I've ever heard of. And it's certainly the largest charity shop in the country. And they're making a fantastic job of it. British Heart Foundation opened a huge superstore in Kingston a few years ago, which was actually an old BHS, British Home Stores. So, there's a lot of that going on. But then at the other end of the scale, if you look at something like the work that is being done by Royal Trinity Hospice in London, where they've got, I think, something in the region of 20 or so beautiful boutiques in places like South Kensington and Hampstead and all of these kinds of prestigious locations where they are charging a lot of money but offering a fantastic amount of value, because you walk in there, you get a Versace dress that was that would have been £1,000 and they're selling it for a couple of hundred, and it's almost new. And that's making a lot of money for the hospice and providing a fantastic bargain for people. Like, it's a high-end bargain. It's not something that everyone can afford. Totally understandable. But that's the kind of that's the demographic they're going for. That is their shtick, if you like. That's their identity, is to sell that sort of stuff. And consequently, they get donations of that kind of stuff, because people know that if they donate it to Royal Trinity Hospice, the good cause will get a lot of money out of it. Whereas if they give it somewhere else, they might not. So, there's a lot of that. I mean, I'm not a retailer. I'm not the expert to ask on this kind of subject, but there is certainly an awful lot of creativity going on at all sorts of levels. And if you like, right at the other end of the scale from the Royal Trinity experience is members who are opening pound shops, or value, high value propositions. So we've talked about the qualities of donations going down. One way around that for our members is to open these kinds of shops where they're selling stuff by the kilo, perhaps, or selling it by the bag, or just having rack on rack of really inexpensive stuff, which is easy for people to purchase, and which they can purchase in bulk, and which makes money for the charity. So last year there were 10,200 charity shops. This year there are 10,100 charity shops. Okay, so just as an aside, although there's as we were saying earlier, there are some eye-catching declines, eye-catching closures. Overall, the picture is not one of massive decline by any means, even in number of shops, never mind the square footage thing that we were talking about.
I want to comment just quickly, because we're talking about volunteers, and we're talking about volunteers knowing the local communities, and that's a really powerful story, real powerful piece of comms to tell. I just wanted to know how do you go about getting that story across to people, that pounds that are invested into charity retail creates more in a social value, which is kind of fundamental to, I think, most people's perception of charity shops and charity retail. But how do you communicate that? How do you, in that increasingly busy world, how do we make that story shine?
Well, I think it's difficult, and I think you don't get a huge amount of dwell time in charity. So people will go in there, they will spend, it'll be quick. So if my wife has anything to go by, they go in, they're very skilled at looking to see what's there. And if can't find anything that's of interest, they'll go on to the next one. In terms of influencing the public, you don't get a huge amount of time to do that, and that's why I think having the larger shop with the greater opportunity to have to have a display which says, that's helpful. I mean, we were talking about Royal Trinity before. Their shops are relatively small and very clean and uncluttered. So they don't have a huge amount of space. But what they do is they, every you turn a sort of corner and you'll see a little sign saying, if you for every £50 you spend, we can do this in the hospital, whatever it is. So I think you've got to. The better shops, and we were talking about the Shelter example before, but the better shops are those that are using those. They're not anonymous. They're not a charity shop. They are the Oxfam shop or the hospice shop or whatever it is. So there is you create a degree, not necessarily brand loyalty, but at least brand awareness. You could, for the customer, I don't think you could expect brand loyalty. Particularly because we know that everybody goes from charity shop to charity shop to charity. You get a bit of loyalty with regard to donations, but not necessarily with regard to sales. But what you can do is use your shop to increase the brand awareness. So you can say to someone, okay, you're now in a Mind shop. That means, you are now benefiting mental health across a range of communities in this area. And you can try and get that message across in that way. More centrally, and I'm not sure you're aware of this, but in October 23, we published a social value report, actually, which was an extremely comprehensive look at the social value that charity shops generate. Although it turned out to be a fantastically important exercise, it was difficult to get the message across because the way that you calculate social value is a little bit obscure to explain. We used Treasury methodology. In fact, we used the people who developed the methodology for the Treasury, and we came up with a figure which said that for every £1 invested in charity shops, about £7.25 is generated in social value. But that's not really money. That is a monetized figure of social value. But it's a huge multiplier. And a lot of our members are starting to say to themselves, well, actually, this is something that is really important because that social value applies to customers and staff and volunteers and donors as well. So everyone is getting something out of, interacting with the charity shop in this way. And this is how much they're getting in terms of an increase in their well-being and happiness, monetized using the Treasury methodology. So, but that's a really hard argument to get across. And I think most people, like you've displayed already, this, but actually getting it across is not easy for people. Although of my 4 shoppers, I think the sustainable shopper is the one that understands this kind of stuff the best, really. So the answer to your question is, I don't know how you do it. You just have to keep banging the message home.
I think it's interesting, that whole concept of social value, and I can see where you're coming from with the £7.25 figure, but it's such a nebulous concept to try and get across to people. I could see the challenge there as a marketeer and as a storyteller. I can't help but think the only way you can really do that effectively is through human interest storytelling and sharing real world stories about how charity shops impact real people. Because otherwise it's very difficult. That figure is great and I can see it, but it's difficult to kind of grab hold of that and see the value there, isn't it?
No, it is. And, like everyone else, these people are really busy, and putting that level of effort, into doing that kind of marketing is difficult to find the time. So, I mean, I totally take that point. It's a tricky old thing to do.
Can I move us on just to talk about volunteering and volunteers? In our last show, Piers and I chatted about, we quoted a report, I can't remember who it was from now, but about declining numbers of volunteers recently, and especially in the wake of the pandemic. And I know we talk a lot in this show about the impact of the pandemic, seems to come up in all our conversations. But one of the things they said there was that volunteers are in decline generally, especially amongst older volunteers. People who used to volunteer of an older age before the pandemic aren't doing so anymore. Is that something that is impacting the retail sector? And if so, how are you addressing that?
Okay. So on March the 19th, 2020, we had about 220,000 volunteers in the sector, which made us probably the largest single volunteering force in the country. I mean, there's slight disputes about that, but certainly up there. By the time shop reopening was re-established, what was that, sort of about halfway through 2021, wasn't it? By the time everyone was back in business, it had gone down to about 186,000. So something like a 20% decline. Interestingly, our latest stats seem to indicate that it's gone back up to just over 200,000. Which we weren't quite expecting. But I think that what that disguises is the fact that there might be more volunteers, but they're not working as many hours. So I think what's happened is that, first of all, the pandemic induced a lot of decline in volunteering as people said, I don't want to go out. I've been volunteering in this charity shop for 25 years. It's time for me to do something different. So there was a lot of churn as a result of that. Now everyone's out and about again, and there's absolutely like how it was in 2019. I mean, I don't know if you walked through central London recently, but it is bonkers, just like it was in 2019. So all that's gone. People are still going out now, so they're not sure that's so much of an issue. And people are starting to want to put something back. And the cost of living crisis has eased a bit, perhaps, so they're not having to work quite so hard to earn money, and they've maybe got a little bit more volunteering time than they had last year or the year before. But they're not working as long hours, and that is having a bit of an impact. And it also has a bit of an impact on cost on shop hours, because you can't actually keep your shop open as many hours as you'd like, and that might have an impact on cost, because you might then want to employ staff to plug those gaps. So yes, it has had an impact, but I don't think it's going away. I don't think we're suddenly going to turn all that around and suddenly find, hundreds of thousands more volunteers or something like that. It's not going to happen.
And Robin, you've got a real sort of bird's eye overview of the sector in your role. If you were sitting down with a charity CEO or a board who are thinking about starting or expanding their retail arm, what's the first thing you'd say to them?
I'd say that if you can get the economics right, so if you're able to find an appropriately priced shop environment where you can sell stuff profitably, you should definitely do it, because of the social value that you're going to generate in addition to the economic value that you will provide to your charity. If you can't do that, if you can't find that location, because it is so much about location, that cost-effective location for your shop, well, wait until you can.
And I've got a big general kind of question as well, Robin. What is it that excites you most about the charity retail sector? Where is it heading? What's the next big thing that's coming over the horizon, or you think is coming over the horizon?
But those are two different questions, actually. What excites me most is the incredible level of cooperation that exists between charity retailers. So we run huge numbers of members meetings, special interest groups, and all sorts of things, where people will talk to one another in a way that commercial retailers never would. They'll share privileged information about their operations with one another. If they've got a great idea, they're prepared to share their great idea, even with people who are ostensibly their competitors. They will share those ideas anyway, because they're all in the same boat. So there's this amazing sense of purpose and determination to do the right thing for your charity. That is the most exciting thing about charity retail, and in lots of ways the most moving thing. What's coming over the horizon is more of that, I hope. But also, I think everyone is waking up to the fact that there is this thing called AI out there. And there's got to be ways in which, other than simply getting it to write letters for us, which a lot of members are starting to do, a lot of us are starting to do, but there've got to be ways in which we can leverage that technology to our advantage. And I mentioned one, if you can just hold up to a camera a jumper, and an AI will then list it on various websites for you, including your own. Tell you how much to price it for, tell you what it costs, tell you what discount to give because it's got that small mark on it. And you can do that within, 30 seconds. Okay. You can do that for everything that's coming in your shop. And then you've got a game changer, I think. So that's one example, but there may be loads of other examples that I haven't thought of, where AI could be enormously helpful in these kinds of areas. I think, like everybody else, we're looking. It's a solution waiting for a problem, isn't it, to an extent? But I think it will be a solution down the track. So I think that's what's coming out of the horizon.
Awesome. Robin, it's been fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. Last couple of questions from me, super quick ones. What was the last thing you donated to a charity shop? And what was the last thing you bought from a charity shop?
The last thing I bought from a charity shop was this shirt.
Brilliant.
I can't see a mark on it. It looks pristine.
The last thing I donated was, that's a good question. Was some glassware, I think, actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
Excellent. Robin, thank you ever so much. I think Piers and I, we've got to go and get a bit of a sort out going on. I think better go and take some stuff down the charity shop, I think.
Lately on the show, we've been highlighting some of the UK's fantastic small charities. The ones doing big, meaningful work with small teams, limited budgets, and barely any recognition. They're supporting communities, solving problems, and quietly changing lives every single day, often without anyone shouting about it. So we want to help shine a bit more light their way. If you're part of a small charity, or you know one that deserves a bit more attention, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com, or use the link in the show notes. Tell us who you are, who you support, and what would genuinely help right now, whether that's visibility, connections, or simply someone in your corner. We'll do what we can to share your story. So, Piers, who are you going to spotlight this week?
So, spotlight on Dudley Voices for Choice, which is a charity that's been nominated by Sarah Osterle over on our channels. Now, Dudley Voices for Choice, it works alongside people with learning disabilities and autism to break down barriers in society and their communities, sharing experiences and finding solutions to make the world a more equitable place for everyone, it says. They specialise in self-advocacy for people speaking up for themselves and having that kind of empowerment to look after issues that are important to them. They also help with employment and also with lots of training programmes. So a fantastic little shout out there for Dudley Voices for Choice.
And also this week, we heard from Team Charlie, and they provide respite to children living with brain tumours along with their families. Some really important work there, obviously, giving them the opportunity to do what normal families do, spend precious time together. It's a chance to briefly escape the unimaginable reality of living with childhood cancer. And it's also there to help parents as the financial pressures, with at least one parent having to take time out to become a 24/7 carer for their sick child. So it's a real sort of family charity, bringing people together, giving them those important time and space to create memories together. As they say, it's about creating memories and giving a much needed boost to mental well-being. #4Charlie. So Team Charlie, an incredible charity doing some really important and special work there.
Yeah, shout out. I'll echo that. Shout out to Team Charlie. Brain tumours, obviously, I've got skin in the game there coming from the brain tumour charity, but two more brilliant small charities this week making a huge difference. And don't forget, if there's a small charity you think we should feature, drop us a line at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com or head to the link in the show notes to nominate them.
And that's a wrap for episode 38. A big thank you to Robin Osterle for giving us a reason to go Christmas shopping in our local charity shops this weekend.
I'll see you there, Tim, on our high street, and there's plenty coming up on the show as well, isn't there?
Absolutely. We'll try and cram as much in before Christmas as we can, including a great chat in a fortnight with Howard Taylor, CEO of J.K. Rowling's charity, the Lumos Foundation.
No doubt we'll have lots of Harry Potter kind of puns to go with that, Tim, and that'll be fascinating. We're also back next week with another The Charity Show Bites, so give us a follow on your usual podcast platform to make sure you don't miss it.
And while you're there, please give us a quick 5-star rating too. It really helps others in the sector to find the podcast.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Charity Show.